My husband shoved me into a marble console beneath a wedding portrait in which the bride was not me. The frame jumped against the wall. Pain flashed from my shoulder into my neck, but I kept looking at the photograph. Reed Carlisle in a cream suit, smiling beneath strings of courtyard lights. Paige Nolan in white lace, one hand spread across his chest, red adobe walls and a New Mexico sunset behind them. I had been Reed's wife for 12 years. The portrait looked less than 2 years old. "Lucia, put down the phone," Reed said. I was standing in the living room of a Cherry Creek penthouse I had not known existed until 35 minutes earlier. A plumbing contractor had called because water was leaking into the unit below. The property was covered under a Carlisle family umbrella policy, and my number was still listed as the emergency contact. Reed was not answering, so the building concierge gave me a temporary access code and asked me to let the contractor inspect the laundry room. I had expected wet drywall. Instead, I found a dining table set for 8, a silver ice bucket holding 2 bottles of champagne, and Paige, Reed's chief brand officer, barefoot on a cream rug with my grandmother's turquoise and diamond bracelet around her wrist. At 46, I knew the difference between confusion and denial. Confusion asks questions. Denial bargains with what the eyes have already answered. "Why is she wearing Abuela's bracelet?" I asked. Paige covered it with her other hand. Reed moved between us. He was 51, handsome in the dependable way luxury resort investors liked, dark blonde hair beginning to silver, mountain tan skin, calm blue eyes. He could make a lie sound like an operational update. "This is a company residence," he said. "You came in without permission. The building called me because my name is on the insurance." His eyes shifted toward the hallway. A contractor stood near the open laundry closet, pretending not to hear. Paige found her voice. "You need to leave." I looked at her. She was 35, polished even in bare feet, wearing a white silk blouse and my family's jewelry. "The bracelet first." "It was a gift." "From whom?" Neither of them answered. I raised my phone and photographed the wedding portrait. Reed stepped forward. "Do not turn this into a spectacle." "You framed it." I took another photograph, 2 sets of keys in a ceramic bowl, mail addressed to Paige at that unit, a monogrammed leather folio marked RC. and PN, and a restaurant reservation card wishing them a happy first anniversary. Reed reached for my phone. I backed away. Paige caught the strap of my bag. "Stop acting insane," she said. I pulled the strap free. She lost her balance, stumbled into a bar cart, and fell against the edge. A champagne flute hit the floor. When Paige lifted her head, a thin cut ran through her right eyebrow. Reed looked at the blood and then at me. "You did that deliberately." She grabbed me. He seized my left forearm. I told him to release me. His fingers tightened. I twisted my arm and pushed his wrist away. Reed drove both hands into my shoulders. My back struck the marble console. The wedding portrait rattled above my head. One corner of the frame dropped and hit my cheek. For a moment I tasted metal. The contractor shouted from the hallway. Reed stepped back. Paige began crying. He turned toward her immediately, tenderness softening his voice. "Let me see." I pressed my palm to my cheek. When I lowered it, there was a narrow streak of blood across my fingers. Reed knelt beside Paige. "If she needs stitches," he said without looking at me, "everyone will know what you are." "What am I?" He finally met my eyes. "Dangerous when you're emotional." The words were ready too quickly. Not wife. Not the woman who had redesigned 4 of his lodges without salary when his company nearly failed after a wildfire. Not the woman who had sat beside him through investor meetings and infertility appointments. Dangerous. Emotional. I took one final photograph, not of Paige's cut, but of Reed holding her face while I stood beneath their wedding portrait with blood on mine. Then I left. The elevator reflected me on 3 sides. A red line crossed my cheekbone. The back of my shoulder throbbed. Finger-shaped marks were already rising on my forearm. In the lobby, the concierge stood when he saw me. "Mrs. Carlisle, are you all right?" The answer yes reached my mouth out of habit. I swallowed it. "No. Please preserve the lobby, elevator, garage, and hallway footage from the last 3 hours. Also keep the entry log showing who issued my access code." He blinked. "Should I call someone?" "Call the police if Mr. Carlisle or anyone from his company asks you to erase anything." Outside, Denver rain had turned to sleet. I did not drive to our house in Greenwood Village. Every room in that house had been arranged to support Reed's public life: stone fireplace, climate-controlled wine wall, photographs of resort openings, dinner table long enough for donors and board members. I drove to an urgent care clinic near Rose Medical Center because the first person I called was Tessa Brooks, my former college roommate and a family law attorney. She answered on the second ring. "Lucia?" Reed pushed me into a console. Silence for 2 beats. "Where are you?" "In my car." "Are you safe right now?" "Yes." Go inside the clinic. Do not drive home. Do not call Reed. Send me every photograph in your location. My voice shook. There's a wedding portrait. Then we treat it as evidence of a ceremony, not proof of a legal marriage until we verify it. Facts first. Meaning later. That sentence carried me through the clinic doors. A physician documented the cheek cut, bruising across my shoulder blade, and finger marks on my arm. A nurse photographed each injury with my consent. I gave the same account twice without adjectives. Paige grabbed my bag, I pulled free, she fell into the bar cart, Reed grabbed my arm, I removed his hand, and he shoved me. A Denver police officer took a report. No one arrested Reed that night. No one solved my marriage under fluorescent lights. The ordinary pace of the process felt frustrating and strangely safe. Tessa arrived with a phone charger, clean sweater, and overnight bag. She examined my cheek without touching it. Hotel, she said. I checked into a small downtown hotel under my maiden name, Lucia Navarro. Seeing it on the registration screen tightened my throat. Navarro. The name on the first exhibit design award I ever won. The name I had stopped using professionally after Reed told me Carlisle sounded more reassuring to investors. At 12:52 a.m., his message arrived. You entered a private residence and assaulted Paige. She required medical care. My counsel will contact you. Another came 6 minutes later. Make this public and I will make sure the full history becomes public too. I took screenshots and sent them to Tessa. Her answer was immediate. Do not respond. At 1:27, Reed's mother called. Celeste Carlisle never swore. She preferred polished sentences that made cruelty sound hereditary. I let the call go to voicemail. Lucia, I have heard a horrifying version of tonight. Paige is injured. Reed is trying to protect everyone, including you. We have all been patient through your career disappointments and the strain caused by your inability to give Reed a family. There are limits to what this family can absorb. Accept help before you destroy the dignity you have left. The message lasted 51 seconds. I listened again, but the second time I listened like a witness. Career disappointments. Inability to give Reed a family. Destroy dignity. Those were not spontaneous words. They were a framework. I forwarded the voicemail. Then I sat on the bathroom floor and cried until the cut on my cheek began bleeding again. I cried for the marriage, but also for the woman I had been at 34 when Reed's company lost 2 lodges to a wildfire and his lenders threatened default. I had taken a leave from a thriving environmental design studio for 1 season to help rebuild. I redrew guest rooms, sourced local stone, negotiated emergency suppliers, and created the recovery campaign that turned disaster into Reed's brand story. 1 season became 11 years. The magazine profiles called him visionary. My title changed from design consultant to founder's wife. I cried for 5 fertility cycles, daily injections, and every dinner where Celeste asked whether I had considered how much time I was wasting. Reed always squeezed my knee beneath the table. He never told her to stop. By 3:40 a.m., grief had made room for anger. I opened my laptop and created a folder called Carlisle. The penthouse photographs had synced. I zoomed in on the wedding portrait. Reed and Paige stood in a Santa Fe courtyard beneath strands of papal picotto and white roses. Paige wore a ring. A man in a dark suit held an open book behind them. 2 women stood at the edge of the frame. Evidence of a ceremony. Not yet proof of a license. At 8 o'clock, Tessa arrived with coffee and questions. Why did the concierge let you upstairs? I explained the leak, the umbrella policy, and my emergency listing. Years earlier, I had organized the insurance schedule for Reed's family trusts and company residences. Apparently no one removed my number from that unit. So you did not follow him, guess a code, or break a lock? No. Did you push Paige? I pulled my bag away. Did you strike her? No. Did you take the bracelet? No. Did you threaten either of them? No. Tessa set down her pen. The concierge log and contractor matter. The cameras may show you were invited in and how everyone left. What happened inside will still be disputed. Powerful people survive the first days by making enough noise that no one waits for the record. My phone lit up as if Reed had heard her. A business newsletter notification appeared. Resort founder's estranged wife in altercation with senior executive. I stared at the word estranged. We weren't estranged. Tessa read the article. An unnamed source claimed Reed and I had lived separately for months, that I entered an executive residence without permission, and that Paige was injured when I became aggressive. The article referred to long-standing emotional strain related to career loss and unsuccessful family planning. My stomach turned. They used the fertility treatments. Tessa's face went still. That language was prepared. By noon, 4 websites had repeated it. A photograph of me leaving the penthouse building appeared beside one story. Comments invented the rest: jealous wife, failed designer, barren social climber, violent woman. I read until someone wrote that women who cannot keep a man should not blame the replacement. Tessa closed my laptop. No more comments. I used to manage resort crises before Reed hired a public relations team. The phrases aren't his. Whose are they? Celeste uses a Denver reputation firm called Red Peak Advisory. They make attacks sound like concern. Tessa hired a licensed investigator named Marcus Bell. His instructions were narrow: verify the penthouse history, preserve lawful records, identify the Santa Fe ceremony location, and trace public business connections without pretending suspicion was proof. By evening, the concierge confirmed in writing that he called me, issued the access code, and requested entry for the plumbing contractor. Cameras showed me entering alone. They later showed Reed and Paige leaving together. Paige walked to the elevator with a small bandage above her eyebrow and carried her own overnight bag. That did not prove every movement inside. It did make the early stories look dishonest. At 6:15, Tessa received a settlement offer from Reed's attorney. I could use the Greenwood Village house temporarily, receive a substantial cash payment, and end the marriage privately. In return, I had to issue a statement saying Reed and I had separated months earlier and that I caused Paige's injury during an emotional misunderstanding. They want you to purchase the settlement with a confession, Tessa said. How much? She named a number large enough to change most lives. I looked at the purple marks on my arm. No. You do not have to decide from pride. I'm deciding from accuracy. Tessa sent the rejection. That night, my father called. I let it ring. His voicemail was careful. Mija, Reed contacted us. Your mother's vineyard loan is still with Summit Frontier Bank, and Reed sits on the advisory council. The expansion could collapse if the bank gets nervous. I don't know what happened. Maybe accept temporary terms until everyone calms down. Truth can be sorted out later. Truth later. For 12 years, later had been the room where my needs went to disappear. I did not call back. The next morning, Marcus sent a preliminary report. The penthouse had been leased for 16 months through Juniper Crest Holdings, an LLC managed by Paige. Rent was funded by a consulting company that billed North Coast Retreats, Reed's resort group. Marcus also identified the wedding courtyard, a small historic inn in Santa Fe. He had requested the public county index. The smaller betrayal arrived before the larger one. Tessa obtained my fertility clinic records. Near the back was a note I had never seen. Male partner advised that testosterone use may be suppressing sperm production. Recommended endocrinology follow-up and medication change. Partner declined to discuss with spouse present. The date was 6 years earlier. Reed had told me every test was normal. He had held me in the clinic garage and said the doctors believed my age and ovarian reserve were the central problem. For 6 years, I had treated my body like the guilty party. For 6 years, Celeste had sharpened that guilt at family dinners. Reed had possessed another piece of the truth and let me carry all of its weight. I slid the page toward Tessa. It may not decide the financial case, she said. But it explains why their media language can wound you so precisely. He let me think it was me. Yes. My phone buzzed. A message came from Naomi Kim, an architect I had worked with before my marriage. I saw the news. I also remember who rebuilt the Red Basin Lodge after the fire. I have an adaptive reuse project in Durango and a design lead who just quit. If you want work, call me. I had not spoken to Naomi in 9 years. I called before fear could remind me how long I had been invisible. She answered with no sympathy in her voice. I am not rescuing you, she said. I am offering a damaged 1911 railway hotel, a deadline, and a ballroom nobody knows how to heat. For the first time in 4 days, I smiled. That sounds honest. Can you be in my office at 2 o'clock? Naomi placed blueprints in front of me instead of asking about Paige. For 2 hours, I studied blocked sight lines, inaccessible bathrooms, historic plaster, and a lobby designed around trends instead of human movement. I forgot to be publicly humiliated. At the end, Naomi turned a contract toward me. 8 weeks. Lead the concept rescue. If the owner stops panicking, we discuss the full project. The signature line read Lucia Navarro. My own name. My hand trembled as I signed. It felt like circulation returning. At 5:36, Tessa called. Marcus found a recorded marriage certificate in Santa Fe County. Reed Carlisle and Paige Nolan. 13 months ago. I sat perfectly still. Recorded. License, officiant, witnesses, return certificate. We are ordering the certified copy. Reed had taken me to Aspen for our anniversary 10 months earlier. He had held my hand at Celeste's Christmas dinner 3 months after that. Paige had attended both company events as an employee. The certified record would prove this was not a romance I refused to accept. It was another marriage constructed inside mine. And Reed was not trying only to protect Paige. He was trying to protect the machinery that made 2 lives possible. The certified certificate arrived 2 days later. Tessa brought it to the hotel in a plain county envelope. Reed and Page had applied together, stood before a licensed officiant, and returned the signed record. Page's sister and a North Coast regional manager were listed as witnesses. Reed had a second mother-in-law. That ordinary relationship hurt more than the seal. Someone had helped Page choose a dress. Someone had taken photographs. Someone from Reed's company had watched the ceremony and returned to Colorado, where I continued appearing beside Reed as his wife. We amend the divorce petition, Tessa said. We request preservation of financial records and appropriate restraints on unusual transfers. We send the certificate where the law requires. We do not prosecute Reed on social media. What does it change? It gives us a clear basis to examine spending on the penthouse, Santa Fe travel, and anything used to maintain this arrangement. It may create criminal questions, but those belong to investigators. Our case remains the marriage, the money, and your safety. The paper felt strangely light in my hands. Proof did not arrive with music. It arrived with a recording number and a county clerk's stamp. We filed the amended petition that afternoon. Reed's lawyer answered before sunset. He called the Santa Fe ceremony a private formalization entered under a mistaken understanding, and claimed Reed believed our marriage had ended in everything but paperwork after a difficult conversation 17 months earlier. I read the filing twice. Which conversation? Tessa scanned the paragraph. He says you discussed living separately after a fertility appointment. I told him I could not keep attending appointments alone. He slept in the guest room for 4 nights. Did either of you move? No. File anything? No. Joint taxes after that? Yes. Public events? At least 7. Anniversary trip? Aspen. Tessa looked over her glasses. Then the phrase everything but paperwork has chosen a difficult set of facts. The emergency hearing was scheduled for the following week. Reed did not wait. Our main credit card stopped working that night. The next morning, my login to a shared investment account failed. Auto pay for the hotel reservation was removed. A banker I had known for years called to say Reed reported possible fraudulent activity by a spouse during separation. I felt exposed in a way the gossip stories had not managed. At 46, after 12 years in a house with 6 bedrooms, I stood at the front desk asking whether my old debit card could cover another week. Tessa told me to document each restriction. Do you have independent funds? About $28,000 in the Navarro account. Reed used to call it my escape fund as a joke. Use your own money for immediate expenses. We will address ordinary access in court. Do not drain joint accounts or create the behavior he is already describing. Humiliation clarified what comfort had blurred. I needed income Reed could not switch off. Naomi drove me to Durango 3 days after the certificate arrived. The railway hotel stood 4 blocks from the old depot, a brick building with arched windows, a faded ballroom, and a lobby buried under fake rustic beams installed in the 1990s. I walked the property with a tape measure clipped to my belt and a notebook in my hand. By noon, I had forgotten my phone existed. By 4 o'clock, I had reopened a blocked view to the courtyard, found space for 3 accessible guest rooms, and persuaded Naomi not to rip out the original mosaic floor. This is why I called you, she said. Because I argue with demolition crews? Because you know damage and history are not the same thing. I thought about that all the way back to Denver. Then Reed attacked the place where I had begun to stand. Naomi called at 6:20 the next morning. I need to send you something. A PDF had been distributed anonymously to the Durango Hotel's owners and lenders. It accused me of stealing North Coast design systems, misusing confidential vendor prices, and being investigated for assault. It paired gossip headlines with photographs of North Coast properties and pages from an old portfolio bearing my maiden name. The message was simple: anything valuable I knew belonged to Reed, anything unstable belonged to me. I don't believe it, Naomi said. But the Lenders Council wants a review. I have to pause your next phase approval. I understand. Lucia, do what you have to do. Just preserve the email and original attachment. For 30 seconds after the call, I could feel Reed's hands on my shoulders again. Then I called Tessa. Marcus examined the sender information. The message came through a new domain and privacy proxy. That proved little. One photograph inside the packet proved more. It showed a prototype suite at North Coast's Mesa Sky Resort before opening. The image had never appeared in marketing. I knew because I had directed the photographer and rejected that frame after a mirror reflected unfinished electrical work. Only 9 people received the internal contact sheet. Enough to narrow, Marcus said. Not enough to accuse. My mother appeared in the hotel lobby that afternoon. The desk called my room. Ms. Navarro, Rosa Navarro is asking to see you. I went downstairs. Mom sat on a gray sofa holding her purse with both hands. She looked smaller than she had at Christmas. Your father doesn't know I'm here. I remained standing. Why are you? Her eyes filled. The bank called about the vineyard expansion. They are reviewing the line of credit. Your father believes Reed can calm them. Then he should ask Reed not to commit bigamy or use company money to smear his wife. Lucia, please. We don't know what happened inside that apartment. I felt something in me become quiet. You know what happened at the clinic. You saw the photographs. You heard Celeste blame me before the cut on my face was dry. Mom looked down. Your father thinks a private agreement would give everyone room to breathe. Everyone except me. She began to cry. My body leaned toward her before I made a decision. I had spent my life comforting her whenever my boundaries made her afraid. I stayed where I was. I'm not asking you to attack Reed, I said. I'm asking you to stop offering me as payment for the vineyard. You've changed. Yes. The answer surprised us both. I walked her to the revolving door but did not invite her upstairs. That night, an email arrived from Adrian Cole, a former senior accountant at North Coast. I remembered him as a quiet man who color-coded every spreadsheet and never spoke without a number. His message contained 4 lines. I saw the packet sent to Durango. I know which vendor built it and how the invoices were hidden. I kept copies because they asked me to use wildfire recovery codes. Have your lawyer contact mine. Tessa arranged a meeting through Adrian's attorney. When I entered her conference room the next afternoon, Adrian sat with an unopened bottle of water and a laptop bag at his feet. I'm sorry, he said. For what? For recognizing a lie and deciding my salary made it none of my business. Tessa redirected him. Tell us only what you personally saw. Adrian described Red Peak Advisory, the reputation firm I had named. North Coast had used it for legitimate crises, a kitchen injury, wildfire evacuations, and a guest data incident. But 12 days before I entered the penthouse, Celeste instructed finance to open a new Red Peak matter called Leadership Household Transition. Before the leak? I asked. Before the penthouse incident, Adrian said. Before Paige fell. Before Reed shoved me. Before anyone could honestly call me violent. After the confrontation, Red Peak billed for media placement, search manipulation, comment seeding, opposition research, and career leverage. The invoices were routed through dormant wildfire reconstruction codes. Who approved them? Tessa asked. Reed approved 3. Celeste approved 2. Paige was copied on at least one scope change. My mouth went dry. What did the original setup say? Adrian opened a document his lawyer had already reviewed. The internal purpose line read, manage resistance to planned domestic announcement, establish separation narrative, protect executive continuity. I had not found the second marriage too early. I had interrupted their launch schedule. The emergency hearing began the next morning. Reed sat at the opposite table in a charcoal suit. He looked rested. The fading yellow bruise along my cheek seemed to belong to another social class. Tessa made a narrow request: preserve financial and digital records, restrict unusual transfers, restore reasonable access to ordinary marital funds, and prevent either party from using shared assets to influence witnesses or employment. Reed's attorney described the account lockouts as risk controls after a volatile incident. Then Tessa introduced the certified New Mexico marriage record. Nothing theatrical happened. The judge did not gasp. But Reed's attorney stopped calling Paige a colleague. The judge asked whether Reed and I had filed joint taxes after the Santa Fe ceremony, whether we still occupied the same home, and whether company-linked funds paid for the penthouse. Reed's attorney requested time. The judge ordered record preservation, limited extraordinary transfers, restored defined access for ordinary expenses, and set a disclosure schedule. It was not victory. It was a lock Reed could no longer turn without leaving fingerprints. Reporters waited outside because the amended petition was public. Tessa said I did not have to speak. For 2 weeks, Reed, Paige, Celeste, and strangers had supplied my personality. I stepped toward the microphones. My marriage belongs in court now, I said. I will not try it on the courthouse steps. The records filed today can be read by anyone. I am asking for something influence should never replace, that facts be allowed to arrive before a woman is diagnosed by a headline. Then I left. The clip spread. The internet did not become kind, but the word unstable began losing ground to secret marriage. That evening, North Coast's board announced an outside review of the penthouse, Red Peak expenses, and related party payments. At 10:48 p.m., Reed called from an unfamiliar number. Tessa was in my hotel room reviewing the hearing order. I put the call on speaker and used an app that announced recording at the start. Colorado's consent rules did not require the announcement if one participant consented, but I wanted no ambiguity. Reed heard the automated voice. You're recording your husband now? Yes. You have no idea what you are destroying. I know what I'm leaving. Naomi Kim will drop you the moment the Durango lenders understand every method you use came from North Coast. My stomach tightened. Did you send the packet? He laughed. You always needed strangers to tell you were talented. That weakness is older than me. No. My weakness was accepting your version of me as expert testimony. Silence. Then Reed made the mistake. You should have taken the first offer before Mother had to activate Red Peak. Across the room, Tessa stopped writing. Reed ended the call. I sent her the recording before either of us spoke. The next morning, Naomi called. Counsel cleared you, she said. The confidential image came from North Coast's archive, not your files. The lenders are reinstating your phase. I sat on the edge of the bed. Thank you. Do not thank me. Come remove 14 fake beams from my lobby. I laughed. 3 weeks later, I left the hotel for a furnished one-bedroom apartment near Cheeseman Park. The kitchen had 3 cabinets, the balcony faced an alley, and the only fireplace appeared on a laptop screen when I wanted background noise. I loved it. On the first night, I made scrambled eggs, ate at the counter, and left my phone charging in the bedroom. At 8:30, Tessa arrived with 2 storage boxes. These will ruin your evening. Inside were Red Peak invoices, North Coast emails, calendar entries, and contractor notes produced under the disclosure order. Near midnight, Tessa opened a thread dated 15 days before the penthouse confrontation. The subject line was Navarro response plan. My maiden name. Celeste wrote that the family should prepare for my likely emotional escalation once Reed's new household became public. She recommended emphasizing my infertility grief, decade outside formal employment, financial dependence, and supposed inability to accept change. Reed replied 22 minutes later. Approved. Keep Lucia cooperative until after the lender summit. Attached was a draft announcement saying Reed and I had quietly separated months earlier. The announcement was written while I still slept beside him. The shove in the penthouse had felt like my marriage breaking. It had already been dismantled in rooms I never entered, by people deciding which private wound would make the best public weapon. Tessa closed the folder. You have a choice. We can use this leverage toward a very strong confidential settlement, or continue through discovery knowing it will become more invasive. I pictured the Durango mosaic beneath a layer of construction dust. I pictured Mom asking me to help everyone breathe. I pictured Celeste turning infertility into a communications asset. I continue. Tessa nodded. Then Reed sits for deposition tomorrow. The deposition took place on the 31st floor of a glass tower downtown. Snow moved across the windows in thin horizontal lines, erasing the mountains and revealing them again. Reed arrived with 3 lawyers and the expression he used before speaking to investors. His suit was charcoal. His cufflinks were the silver ones I had given him after North Coast opened its first profitable resort. For years I had believed that success looked good on him. That morning it looked like a costume assembled from other people's faith. I sat beside Tessa with a legal pad I did not use. Reed gave his name, swore to tell the truth, and began by calling the Santa Fe ceremony symbolic. Tessa placed the certified marriage record in front of him. Did you and Paige Nolan apply for this license together? Yes. Did you sign it? Yes. Did you know you were still legally married to Lucia Navarro? His lawyer objected. Reed answered anyway. I believed my marriage to Lucia was functionally over. Tessa's voice stayed almost gentle. That was not my question. The room went quiet except for the court reporter's keys. Yes, he said. Tessa showed him photographs from the lender summit 7 weeks after Santa Fe. In them, I stood beside him in a white silk suit while he introduced me as his wife. Paige was visible near the stage, wearing a blue dress and holding a North Coast folder. Was your marriage to Lucia functionally over when you asked her to attend this event? Our private situation was complicated. Was it complicated when you kissed her for the cameras? We were protecting the company. Did Lucia know that? He did not answer until his lawyer told him to. No. There it was. Not confusion. Not a love story that had become inconvenient. A business decision in which I had been assigned a role and denied the script. Tessa moved to the fertility records. Reed's lawyer fought every question, but the judge's earlier discovery order left little room. Reed admitted receiving the note about the effect of his testosterone use. He admitted refusing the follow-up test. He admitted he never told me. You continued allowing your wife to undergo treatment? Tessa asked. The doctors said there were multiple factors. Did you tell her there was a documented factor on your side? No. When your mother proposed using Lucia's infertility grief to describe her as unstable, did you correct the record? His eyes came to me for the first time all day. No. I had imagined that answer breaking something open inside me. Instead, it landed with the clean finality of a lock turning. In the hallway afterward, Reed caught up before the elevator. Lucia, the science was complicated. I pressed the button. The science may have been complicated, I said. The lie was simple. I never wanted you to suffer. The elevator doors opened. Then you should have stopped choosing the things that made me suffer. I stepped inside with Tessa. Reed remained in the corridor, shrinking between the closing doors. The deposition changed the temperature of the case. North Coast's board hired an outside forensic firm. Within 10 days, Reed was placed on administrative leave. Celeste resigned from the board before they could vote on her removal, issuing a statement about protecting the company from a private family dispute. The forensic team did not treat it as private. They found Red Peak invoices hidden beneath wildfire recovery consulting codes. They found North Coast money used for the Santa Fe suite, the photographer, Paige's ring, and renovations to the Cherry Creek penthouse. They found a password-protected folder containing versions of the false separation announcement, draft talking points about my mental health, and a calendar counting down to the lender summit. The smear campaign had not been improvised after the penthouse. The penthouse had simply forced them to deploy it early. At Durango, the owner called Naomi and me into the temporary site office. I prepared for another polite retreat. Instead, he set a full contract on the table. We reviewed the source of the allegations, he said. We also reviewed your work. I should have done those things in the opposite order. The contract made me design principal for the entire hotel, not a consultant hidden behind Naomi's studio. My name would appear on the project materials. I would choose my own team. I read the page twice before signing. Naomi waited until we were outside, beside the old platform where snow had collected along the rails. You know this means you have to stop introducing yourself as someone who used to be a designer. I laughed, and then I cried hard enough that she had to hold my shoulders. I am a designer, I said. I know. I've been waiting for you to hear it. Work did not heal me in a straight line. Some mornings I could direct a 20-person meeting and then shake in a bathroom stall because a man in the lobby wore Reed's cologne. Some nights I woke from dreams in which the Santa Fe portrait hung in every room I entered. But the Durango Hotel gave my days shape. We restored hand-painted ceiling panels instead of replacing them. We converted the freight room into a library with rolling ladders and deep green shelves. In the lobby, the old tile map became the center of the floor, bordered by new stone cut to show the river, the rail line, and the mountain passes that had carried people through for more than a century. I hired a young designer named Elena Vargas who had been told her portfolio was too emotional. On her second week, she proposed using woven leather panels inspired by saddles from the Railway Museum. Too much, she asked. Not if you can explain why it belongs. She explained. It belonged. That became the rule for the whole project and, quietly, for my life. Not whether something looked respectable from a distance. Whether it belonged. Reed's first settlement offer arrived in a white binder 3 inches thick. He would give me the Denver house, a cash payment large enough to make my father whistle when I eventually told him, and my full interest in 2 early North Coast properties. In return, I would agree that we had separated before Santa Fe, that the penthouse injury resulted from a mutual physical dispute, and that neither party would discuss medical records, company spending, or communications consultants. Tessa let me read it without interrupting. Financially, it is strong, she said. It requires me to validate the lie. Yes. Then it is not strong enough. The second offer removed the false separation date but kept the confidentiality clause. The payment grew. I declined again. Dad did not understand at first. We were sitting in my parents' kitchen while Mom packed leftover enchiladas into a container. You could secure yourself forever, he said. After everything he took, why not take what he is offering? Because he is not paying for my silence about a company strategy. He is trying to buy ownership of my memory. Dad looked toward the dark window over the sink. The bank released our vineyard loan from the North Coast guarantee, he said. Tessa's letter helped. We are not tied to him anymore. It was his way of telling me I did not have to save them by surrendering myself. Mom set the container in front of me. Then don't. The civil trial began 8 months after the day at the penthouse. Reporters filled the hallway because North Coast had become a regional success story and people liked watching polished stories crack. I testified for almost 6 hours. Reed's lawyer showed the jury angry messages I had sent after discovering unexplained charges. He asked how often I drank wine, whether infertility treatment had affected my moods, and why I went into a residence I had never visited. I answered each question. Yes, I had been angry. Yes, hormones had affected my body. Yes, I entered the penthouse after an insurance alert identified water damage at a property linked to our policy, with a contractor and the concierge present. Pain was not proof of unreliability. Anger was not proof of violence. A woman could be devastated and still describe what happened accurately. The lobby camera played without sound. Paige reached for my bag. I pulled back. She lost her footing. Reed crossed the space and drove both hands into me. My shoulder struck the console. The frame broke against my cheek. No amount of public relations language could make the movement mutual. Paige testified on the fourth day. Her confidence lasted until Tessa displayed the lender summit photograph. You attended this event? Tessa asked. Yes. You watched Reed introduce Lucia as his wife? Yes. This was after your Santa Fe ceremony? Yes. Did you ask him why? Paige looked at Reed. The judge reminded her to answer. He said Lucia was being handled and that the public transition needed to wait. Did you know Lucia had not agreed to a separation? I knew she had not signed anything. That was not my question. Paige's voice became almost inaudible. Yes. On the next morning, Adrian arrived at court carrying a small banker box. He had already given us the coded invoices, but while preparing for his testimony he found an archived email from Reed that had escaped deletion because it was attached to an old audit note. The email was sent to Celeste, Paige, and Red Peak 9 days before the penthouse confrontation. If Lucia reaches out to hospitality contacts, make sure she cannot get a credible contract while this is active. Dependence keeps the timetable controlled. The defense challenged its authenticity. North Coast's own server records confirmed it within hours. I read the sentence from the counsel table. The anonymous packet sent to Durango had not been a panicked act by Paige or an overzealous consultant. Reed had ordered the destruction of the career he once claimed I was foolish to abandon. That was the last surprise he gave me. After Adrian testified, Reed asked to speak with me in a conference room. Tessa came with me and remained by the door. Reed looked older than he had at the deposition. The perfect haircut was gone. His tie sat crooked. I was under extraordinary pressure, he said. The lender summit could have collapsed the whole group. Thousands of people depended on us. So you made me dependent on you. I thought once the transition was complete, I could make it right financially. You cannot reimburse a person for making her doubt her own life. He put both palms on the table. What do you want? For 11 years, that question from him had meant which restaurant, which fabric, which weekend. It had never meant what it should have meant. I want the record to be true. The judge's ruling found that Reed had dissipated marital assets, misused company funds, committed financial retaliation, and made knowingly false statements about the date of our separation. The court rejected the claim that the penthouse incident was mutual and assigned responsibility for my injuries to him. The divorce judgment gave me a share of the company value we had built during the marriage, repayment of the money diverted to the penthouse in Santa Fe, damages related to the campaign against my career, and the Denver house. I sold the house 4 months later. I did not want the kitchen I had renovated around Reed's favorite stone or the bedroom where he approved my replacement from the pillow beside mine. Part of the sale funded a new studio in a brick building near Union Station. I put Lucia Navarro design on the glass door in letters large enough to read from the sidewalk. The first morning I unlocked that door, the space still smelled of paint and sawdust. We had 6 desks, for clients, and a coffee machine Naomi claimed was an insult to coffee. Elena brought a cactus in a blue ceramic pot. Tessa sent a level with a card that said, "Build it straight this time." I kept the card in my top drawer. Our first independent commission was not glamorous. A family in Aurora wanted to convert an abandoned grocery store into a community kitchen, childcare room, and small business incubator. Their budget was less than North Coast used to spend staging a single resort opening. We spent 3 weeks finding ways to preserve light, reuse shelving, and give the childcare room a secure view into the kitchen so parents could work without feeling separated from their children. At the public presentation, an older woman touched the rendering and asked whether the long central table would really be built. Yes, I said. Good. People need a place where they can see each other. I thought of all the beautiful North Coast rooms designed to direct attention toward Reed. Then I looked at our plain drawing of a table where no seat was more important than another. That project did not make a magazine. It did make me understand what I wanted my studio to become. I also began teaching a monthly workshop at a Denver design program. I called it the room behind the rendering. We talked about budgets, contracts, credit, and the quiet ways creative labor disappeared when ownership was assigned to the loudest person in the room. I never used Reed's name. I did not need to. The students recognized the pattern. After one session, a student waited until the others left. "How do you know when leaving costs less than staying?" she asked. I wanted to give her a sentence clean enough to carry home. Life had not given me one. "You start counting what staying requires you to deny," I said. "Then you tell the truth to somebody safe." She wrote it down. I hoped she would not need it. I was glad she had it. The district attorney pursued separate charges involving the second marriage record and company expenditures. Reed eventually pleaded guilty to bigamy, falsifying business records, and unlawful use of corporate funds. He received a short custodial sentence, supervised release, and restitution obligations. Paige accepted a lesser plea for her part in the false filings and spending. Celeste faced civil penalties and a ban from holding a fiduciary role at North Coast. The company survived. Reed-Smith did not. Under new leadership, North Coast sold the Cherry Creek penthouse. The board removed every press release that called Reed a visionary family man and issued a correction acknowledging my early design and development work. It was not an apology. It was a record. The Durango Hotel opened 19 months after Naomi first called me. On opening morning, sunlight crossed the restored tile map and climbed the library shelves. Guests stood beneath the hand-painted ceiling panels with their faces lifted. A design magazine placed the lobby on its cover. The article named Naomi's architecture firm, Elena's material work, and me as design principal. My name was not attached to Reed, North Coast, or a tragedy. It stood beside the work. Mom and Dad came to the opening. My brother arrived late and found me near the old ticket window. "I should have called you before I called him," he said. I knew he meant the week the bank threatened his construction credit and he had begged me to accept Reed's terms. "Yes," I said. He looked surprised that I did not soften it. "I'm sorry. I believe you. Trust will take longer." He nodded. That was the beginning of our repair, not the end of it. Tessa attended the opening in a red suit and inspected every room as if preparing to cross-examine the furniture. Naomi raised a glass to second acts, then corrected herself. "No," she said. "To the life that was there all along." Months later, a padded envelope arrived at my studio from Paige's attorney. Inside was Abuela's turquoise and diamond bracelet. The clasp was bent. A stone was missing from the edge. For a long time I could only hold it in my palm. I had once thought reclaiming it would feel like winning. Instead, I remembered Abuela fastening it around my wrist on my wedding day. She had told me turquoise carried the color of sky after a storm, but she had never promised the storm would not come. I took the bracelet to a jeweler who repaired old pieces by hand. He replaced the missing stone with turquoise from the same region and strengthened the clasp without polishing away the small scratches. "It will not look new," he warned. "Good," I said. "It isn't new." I wore it for the first time at dinner with Tessa, Naomi, Elena, and my parents. Not to prove that Paige had lost it or that I had won it back. I wore it because it belonged to the women in my family, and now it belonged to the woman I had become. My life grew ordinary in ways I had once underestimated. I rented a bright condo with windows facing east. I bought groceries for one without feeling abandoned in the produce aisle. I learned which floorboard creaked and stopped expecting Reed's footsteps. On Sundays, I walked to the studio before the city became loud and sketched with music playing. Sometimes strangers recognized me from the trial and told me I was brave. I thanked them, though bravery was not how most of it had felt. It had felt like answering the next email. Showing up for the next meeting. Telling the truth again after someone richer had called it instability. The last North Coast document I received was a formal notice that the court had dissolved my marriage to Reed and declared his Santa Fe marriage invalid from its beginning. I placed it in the archive box with the insurance alert, the fertility note, the Red Peak emails, and the photograph from the lender summit. Then I closed the lid. The evidence had done its work. I did not need to live inside it. That evening, I stayed late at the studio reviewing plans for a small desert and outside house. The design used pale plaster, dark timber, blue tile, and a courtyard open to the sky. On the cover page, beneath the project name, were the words designed by Lucia Navarro. For years I thought losing Reed would mean losing the life we built. I had been wrong about what we built, and wrong about who built it. The penthouse portrait had shown a man standing between two versions of his future, believing he could erase the woman who knew his past. He could not erase me. He could only reveal me to myself.